I'm VJ Hamilton and welcome to the Autoimmune Reset, the place for you to learn how to thrive with autoimmune disease and feel empowered to take steps to transform your health to feel better than ever. You can start making changes today to improve your health. So with every episode, my mission is to share with you simple ways to up-level your diet and lifestyle with key learnings from my own journey reversing autoimmune disease and inspirational stories from those who have reset their autoimmune symptoms and are now thriving in life. I suffered from autoimmune disease for over 25 years and now I live symptom-free, and I wish the same for you as well. So thank you for being here and sharing this time with me. Now let's get started. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Autoimmune Reset podcast. I'm your host, VJ Hamilton. I'm a nutritionist, scientist, and expert in autoimmune disease. And today we're going to be covering the link between blood pressure and autoimmune disease. And I'm going to be going through everything that you need to know when it comes to the link between blood pressure and autoimmune disease and what to look for. There are some people who have autoimmune conditions who have very high blood pressure, and I'm going to explain why that's the case. And then other people who have different types of autoimmune conditions may have very low blood pressure. And it's essential to understand the underlying mechanisms, because once you understand what those are, then you know how you need to address them to help you with your symptoms. And it's really working on the root cause of your symptoms where you're going to see the most results. So I'll be going through that today, and I'm going to be going through some key markers that are worth exploring if you have any issues with your blood pressure, which I'll be mentioning on the podcast episode as well. So whether you have an autoimmune disease, whether you have high blood pressure or low blood pressure, then I'm going to be going through everything today. Often people talk more about high blood pressure and the problems with high blood pressure, and it's linked to cardiovascular disease. I had a fellow nutritionist who reached out to me and was asking whether I could help her with a client who had high blood pressure, and I'm known for specializing in autoimmune conditions, but the truth is I work a lot with cardiovascular health as well, because often when somebody has an autoimmune condition and they have inflammation, they're more likely to have cardiovascular issues. And for example, in my family, we have a lot of people who have autoimmune conditions, but as well as that, a lot of the people in my family have had cardiovascular issues as well. And a lot of people on one side of my family have unfortunately died quite early from cardiovascular events. So I'm sure there is a link there, and both conditions are driven by systemic inflammation, and this inflammation can directly impact the blood vessels. And that's what can contribute to high blood pressure, because when you have chronic inflammation, it can cause stiffening of the arterial walls. And that's a condition known as arterial stiffness. And that forces the heart to work harder and pump blood through the body. So that can create an issue. Now, if you have high blood pressure and you have an autoimmune condition, then it is worth checking in with some key markers when it comes to your cardiovascular health. And one of the main ones that I test is high sensitivity C-reactive protein, because a lot of people will have their C-reactive protein tested by their GP or in conventional medicine. But the truth is that doesn't always give you an indication of systemic inflammation, which is what you're really looking for in a chronic illness like an autoimmune condition, but also cardiovascular disease, because it's that chronic inflammation that can cause damage over time that can then contribute to the issues that someone may have when it comes to their blood vessels in cardiovascular disease. And they know that this elevated high sensitivity C-reactive protein is seen in autoimmune diseases like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and psoriasis. And you may be surprised by that, because I'm talking about psoriasis, which is a skin issue, or arthritis, which we link more to our joints. But these are systemic conditions. They don't just affect the localized areas that we see the symptoms arise in. They can be due to these underlying issues like this chronic systemic inflammation that is causing the symptoms, but it can have a knock-on effect to other systems in the body, including the cardiovascular system, because of its effect on your blood vessels. Another important marker that I test for is lipoprotein A, and elevated lipoprotein A is associated with an increased risk of atherosclerosis. So if I'm working with a client who may have some family history of cardiovascular issues, they have an inflammatory autoimmune condition, then I'm going to be testing for this marker because it's going to give me an idea of whether there is a buildup of plaque in the arteries, and that of course is a risk factor with cardiovascular disease, and it can also be an indication of increase in inflammation, which is obviously a risk factor in an autoimmune condition as well. And lastly, when it comes to cholesterol, the main thing that I'm looking for is these small, dense LDL particles. If you have your cholesterol tested through conventional medicine, they're ordinarily just going to look at your LDL cholesterol, your HDL cholesterol, and your triglycerides. Now that can give me some information. For example, normally if your triglycerides are high, that's much more linked to blood sugar dysregulation and a high sugar diet than anything to do with fats in your diet. And I have this a lot. I have clients coming to me, they might have fatty liver, or they might have issues with their lipids in their blood, and they will just say, I'm not eating any fat at all. Most of the time when it comes to high cholesterol, what I find in my clinical practice is that it's more to do with high amounts of sugar in the diet or to do with dysregulated blood sugar, and that might be linked to insulin resistance, it might be linked to prediabetes, it could be linked to inflammation, it could be linked to high insulin, and then I'm going to be looking at what the underlying root cause of that is. And so, as I said, it can be helpful just to know what your cholesterol levels are and the makeup of it just based on LDL, HDL, and triglycerides. But the truth is, it's the small, dense LDL particles which are particularly dangerous, and these are not tested for in conventional medicine. You will have to get a private panel, and sometimes a cardiologist might test for this, but this is going to tell you how much more likely the LDL particles are going to penetrate the arterial wall and become oxidized, and that's when it creates a problem and can affect the blood vessels. So knowing your small dense LDL particle amount, but also the size of your LDL particles is absolutely key in your cardiovascular health. So if you have high blood pressure, I would certainly be looking at these three markers when it comes to your health, because there is this link with high blood pressure, inflammation, and autoimmune disease. You want to get to the underlying issue, and once you know what is causing the high blood pressure, whether it's inflammation, whether it's blood sugar dysregulation, whether it's something else, then you can work on that. And by working on these lipid abnormalities that you may find in your results, you can really see relief from your autoimmune symptoms, but also that can help with your cardiovascular health. Now, an area that I think is really interesting when it comes to an autoimmune condition is low blood pressure, because no one's really talking about low blood pressure, and everyone sees low blood pressure as quite a good thing, but the truth is it can be as detrimental as high blood pressure, and there are some symptoms that are related to high blood pressure like dizziness and fainting, which can be pretty dangerous as well. And it's the underlying issue that it's demonstrating by having low blood pressure, which again is showing that you need to be concerned if you have low blood pressure. You need to be doing something about it. And I know it is a symptom that a lot of my clients have. I work with either clients with very high blood pressure or very low blood pressure for the most part. That is because of the effect of these autoimmune conditions, because conditions like Addison's disease, Sjogren's disease, and the autonomic dysfunction that we find in lupus can also cause low blood pressure. And autoimmune diseases can affect this autonomic nervous system. I've found that some clients, they're unable to regulate their blood pressure, they're unable to regulate systems in the body which you wouldn't really think about. Even sweating can be a symptom of this. This can be due to chronic inflammation as well, but also adrenal dysfunction, which are common in autoimmune conditions. But that can lead to a reduction in the production of aldosterone, and that's a hormone that helps maintain blood pressure. So a lot of clients will come to me and they are crashing throughout the daytime. And so the most obvious thought that I have when somebody tells me that is that they have issues regulating their blood sugar. But actually, when they start taking electrolytes and start giving their bodies the minerals that they need to help their adrenal function, they find that they stop crashing. So I'm always thinking now, when a client is having lots of fatigue symptoms, they're crashing throughout the daytime, I'm not just thinking about blood sugar dysregulation, I'm also thinking about adrenal function, and especially if they have low blood pressure as well. And not everybody knows what their blood pressure is, but this is something that I struggled with when I was having my autoimmune symptoms, and it's something that I still have to be thinking about today, because based on my personality type and the way I live my life, and I like to be doing lots of things, so I have to always be thinking about supporting my adrenal function. And I think that's just worth considering when it comes to your own health, of how stimulated is your mind throughout the daytime, how much are you doing. Are you just more inclined to be on the go? And if you are, then it might be that your low blood pressure is linked to your adrenal function and linked to your autoimmune condition as well. So aldosterone is extremely important for your blood pressure regulation. And a lot of the time when we talk about blood pressure, we're thinking about the cardiovascular system, and we should be, and that's important. But it's as much to do with your kidney health as it is to do with your heart health. And as I said, aldosterone is a hormone which is produced by your adrenal glands, and it just sits on top of the kidneys, and it plays a crucial role in regulating your blood pressure, controlling the balance of sodium and potassium in your blood. Aldosterone signals to the kidneys to reabsorb sodium into the bloodstream while excreting potassium into the urine. So that's how it helps to regulate everything. And that sodium reabsorption can lead to water retention, which can increase blood volume, and as part of that, it will increase blood pressure. So you can see when that system is out of sync, you are either going to have high blood pressure or low blood pressure. If this aldosterone production is disrupted, it can lead to this imbalance that we're seeing with these autoimmune conditions. There are autoimmune conditions like Addison's disease and primary adrenal insufficiency, and these are autoimmune diseases that specifically target the adrenal glands, and it's one of the conditions that the endocrinologist investigated when I was working with him, because some of my symptoms definitely aligned to Addison's disease, because I was just completely depleted of energy throughout the daytime. But when the adrenal glands are damaged, this results in a reduced amount of aldosterone production, and that can lead to the low blood pressure and dehydration and an imbalance in sodium potassium levels. And I know I was just thirsty all the time. I mean, I am still quite thirsty. And as I said, this is something that I know I continually need to manage, and probably will for the rest of my life. And it's not that hard in managing. I just need to make sure that I'm taking my electrolytes, drinking mineral water, just being conscious of my stress levels, all the good stuff, to be honest. Not just benefiting my adrenal health, but lots of other areas of my health as well. But systemic inflammation can also be a factor with this, because when you have systemic inflammation, it can impair the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is normally referred to as the HPA axis, and that's going to also regulate aldosterone production. And when you have chronic inflammation, it can really dampen down the adrenal response. That reduces aldosterone output and will contribute to low blood pressure. So I really do think blood pressure is a marker to be conscious and aware of, and if you do have low blood pressure, to monitor it, because potentially as you reverse your autoimmune symptoms, your blood pressure will increase as well. And I know when I have done too much that my blood pressure will go quite low. I'm not testing for it. I can just feel it now. And I know I just need to make sure that I'm drinking lots of electrolytes. I'm looking after myself. I'll eat some really nutrient dense foods. So I'm just very aware of that. And I was very aware of this when I was training for the half marathon that I did in September, and I just knew I needed to be really conscious about this. And it was a fear I had because I know I'm more inclined to have low blood pressure, and as I said, it can be dangerous. You can faint, you can have dizziness, and there are lots of other symptoms that come with it as well. There are some specific autoimmune conditions like systemic lupus and Sjogren's syndrome, which can affect the autonomic nervous system, and that's going to disrupt the signals to the adrenal glands and alter aldosterone production. So if you have one of these autoimmune conditions, then again, it's just really important to be aware of this, because you need to make sure that you are maintaining a healthy blood pressure, and you can do that by changing things in your lifestyle, by managing stress and making sure you're getting those key nutrients for your adrenal function. There is also autoimmune related kidney inflammation, which for example could be lupus nephritis, and that can interfere with the kidney's ability to respond to aldosterone. So again, that is going to impact your blood pressure and can cause either high or low blood pressure dependent on the effect. So I've mentioned some of the symptoms of insufficient aldosterone production, but some of the common symptoms include dizziness and lightheadedness, especially when standing up. So if you feel you're going dizzy when you're standing up, then that could be a sign of this. And I still haven't got to the bottom of specifically why this happened to me, but when I was working in a corporate office, a bad time in my autoimmune symptoms, I had a lot going on, but I just remember standing up at work and I almost fainted, and it took me a while to walk across the office. My hearing was going, my sight was going, and I luckily got to the stairwell, and a colleague helped me to get to the stairwell, and I just kind of sat in the stairwell for a moment. And this certainly could be a factor in it. It could have been blood sugar. It could have been other factors. This is definitely a symptom to be aware of, because I do know people who have just completely fainted, and you're more susceptible to getting injured, which is obviously something that I wouldn't want for anyone. Another common symptom is salt cravings. Are you more a salt or sweet craver? Because I'm certainly a salt craver, and I always have been. I used to be absolutely obsessed with crisps. I would eat at least one packet of crisps a day, and there was one year where I just realised that I had eaten at least one packet of crisps a day, if not more, for a whole year. And that's when I decided I really needed to do something about it. And I first just allowed myself a couple of bags of crisps a week. Then I'd allow, I'm sounding quite restricted by saying allow, but then I had a packet of crisps on a Friday, and then I just decided, no, I just can't resist them, so I'm just better just not to have them. And I occasionally will have them if I go to a party, or if I have friends round and I've got just crisps on the side for their children, or to be honest, the adults as well, then I will have some then. But I generally just have to take crisps out of my diet, or I just end up eating too many. But that is the salt craving, and that again can be a sign of a decrease in aldosterone production. Fatigue is again a very common symptom. It can be to do with inadequate blood pressure and reduced circulation, and then muscle weakness and cramps can be caused by potassium imbalances as well. So how do you support aldosterone and blood pressure if you have this issue? There are a couple of ways that you can work on this. You can just make sure that you are staying hydrated, but I don't mean drink a lot of filtered water, because remember, filtered water is stripping out the chemicals, which is good, but it's also stripping out some minerals. So we need to be adding those electrolytes back in, especially if you have an issue with your adrenal function or your aldosterone production. So I will generally have some water in the morning with some electrolytes, and then I'll be doing that in the afternoon as well. And that might change if I'm training, but just making sure that you are drinking plenty of water. You can also have drinks that include natural electrolytes like coconut water or bone broth. You can also add in some Himalayan pink salt. This isn't going to be the right thing for you if you have high blood pressure. This is very much for low blood pressure. And you do need to be conscious about salt if you do have high blood pressure, because some people are going to be more susceptible to higher blood pressure with salt. And I would just say that there are some studies that will show that a high salt diet can be a trigger for an autoimmune condition as well, especially conditions like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. So it's just to be aware of that. But obviously, if you are supporting your adrenal function and you have a autoimmune condition that affects aldosterone production, then certainly bringing in some Himalayan pink salt in is helpful, and you might want to look at electrolytes as well. You can also juice cucumber. Cucumber is full of electrolytes and minerals, and you can just put that in a blender as well, and it will just create a juice for you anyway, and then you get the fiber from the skin. So you can do it in lots of different ways, in lots of natural ways as well, just to make sure that you are getting those electrolytes in. And then some key nutrients are vitamin C and vitamin B5, which are extremely important for your adrenal health and can support aldosterone production. I generally just have a very high need for vitamin C, and as much as I will eat vitamin C rich foods like citrus fruits and red peppers and broccoli and kiwi fruits, I also will generally be supplementing with a vitamin C. There are just some supplements that I feel that I need to maintain a certain level of health, and I wish I could just do it all with diet, but the truth is there are some supplements that I feel that I need to continue taking, and that just really helps me to keep performing at the level that I'd like to perform at. And you can also have for vitamin B5, things like avocados and sunflower seeds. These are really good options to be adding to your diet, because our blood pressure is controlled by our potassium and sodium balance. Potassium-rich foods like bananas and spinach are going to be beneficial. And then if you have low aldosterone, you might need to slightly increase your sodium as well, which, as I said, you can add that Himalayan pink salt either to your food or to some water and just have that. I personally like electrolytes. I used to drink a lot of coconut water, but I just find taking electrolytes works for me, and you just need to find what's works for you as well. Then when it comes to your adrenal health, there are quite a few different supplements and nutrients you can take to help with your adrenal health. Like there are lots of adaptogens that you can take, like ashwagandha, licorice root and rhodiola, but always work with a practitioner. For example, ashwagandha has been shown to have immune stimulatory effects, and that potentially could impact you if you have an autoimmune condition. But I find rhodiola is probably a better alternative because it is less likely to have that immune stimulating effect. And then with licorice root, you just have to be really careful, because if you have high cortisol and you take licorice root, it is going to make your cortisol even higher. And I find people might read that they need licorice root for their stress response and that's going to keep them energized. But actually a lot of people have high cortisol and then they are taking licorice root, and that is just going to make your cortisol even higher, which could impact your thyroid function, could in fact impact your sleep. So just be mindful of that. Licorice root isn't right for everyone, and if you have high blood pressure, it is going to increase your blood pressure. So it's certainly not right for you if you have high blood pressure. And that's, again, as I always emphasize, taking a personalized approach is so important. I couldn't talk about adrenal health without talking about stress management, and I just see this as a challenge for myself and for my clients on a daily basis. We really need to be thinking about how we can reduce the stress that we're feeling, work on our reaction to stress, and to incorporate things in our daily routine that are helping to bring down the stress response, even if it's for 5 minutes. And I know that's easier said than done, but you can set timers on your phone. You can make sure that on an evening you're doing something like yoga or meditation or having an Epsom salt bath, something that's just really calming down your nervous system, particularly at night. But in the daytime as well, it's important, because if you start your day feeling stressed and you just continue to feel stressed throughout your day and you are just adding to your stress load and you're not having any breaks, that is pretty heavy going on your adrenal function, which is why it is so important that you take a break, do some deep breath work, do some visualization, do some journaling, anything that just helps you to come back to the present moment, to feel at ease again. And I know I used to go from meeting to meeting, and if somebody had said to me just to have 5 minutes 3 times a day doing some deep breath work, I just would have brushed it off and thought that they just don't understand what my day is like. But the truth is, looking back, you can have those moments. And when I had my last corporate job, I really set my boundaries in that role, because in a sense I knew I was kind of moving to another career. Even though it was a great job and I actually ended up doing really well in the role, and that shows, you set your boundaries and actually things go a lot better for you. And I would take time at lunch. I'd go out for my hour lunch. I'd walk around. I'd have my lunch outside, or I'd find a place to have my lunch, and I'd put a podcast on, and I had that time to myself. I made sure I had my dogs at that point, so I made sure I was leaving work at a decent time, getting home. I would have a rest on the sofa, because I was still struggling with chronic fatigue at that time. But I was just making sure that I was creating time in my day to calm down my nervous system. Otherwise, I probably was never going to get any better, because all the great work that I was doing from a nutrition perspective, and I was doing all the testing, and I was, doing lots of exercise and movement, I really did need to bring down my stress response. And I know that made a huge difference for me in the long run, especially with the symptom that I had of low blood pressure. So aldosterone is an extremely critical hormone when it comes to maintaining blood pressure and electrolyte balance, and its disruption in autoimmune disease can lead to significant health challenges. So it's just to be aware of this, to monitor it. You can buy devices that you can use at home to check your blood pressure, and I would recommend that if you have high or low blood pressure, to be checking it maybe twice a week or at least once a week, just to make sure that you know where your levels are at, and you can seek help if you find that it's too high or too low. And I would just say, actually, doing some deep breathing, you will find that your blood pressure comes down a lot. So if you have high blood pressure and you take your blood pressure reading, then you sit down and do some deep breaths for 5 minutes, I would like you to take that test again, and you will see that it will have come down a huge amount. And that's what breath work can do for you. And it doesn't need to be anything complex. It's just sitting down and doing deep belly breathing, and that can make such a big difference. And I know, when I was shallow breathing, I don't think it was doing me any favors. And I see people now who are still shallow breathing. And obviously that's the way that we oxygenate our body. If our body's not fully oxygenated, that's putting extra pressure on our bodies as well. So yeah, it's definitely worth checking your blood pressure regularly and just seeing the effect that some of these stress management techniques can have on your blood pressure as well. So let's talk about some other ways that you can lower your blood pressure, because we talked about inflammation being one of the driving forces when it comes to your blood pressure. And that's why an anti-inflammatory diet can really help. Now, if you have tried an anti-inflammatory diet and it's not been working for you, then it might be something else in your body, for example, in your gut, or chemical toxicity, or high viral load, or some other factor that is causing inflammation in your body. And unfortunately, an anti-inflammatory diet can only go so far. So it might be worth exploring that if you've tried an anti-inflammatory diet and really committed to it with eating lots of leafy greens, berries, oily fish, nuts and seeds, and not seen results, then that's when you need to explore further. But I would my diet is very much an anti-inflammatory diet with lots of nutrient dense foods in it as well. And I'm almost certain that makes a big difference for the inflammation in my body, and high blood pressure hasn't been an issue for me because mine has always been more low blood pressure, but it's certainly helped to bring down the inflammation, which helps with my autoimmune conditions as well. Magnesium-rich foods can also help your blood vessels because it helps to regulate your blood pressure by relaxing your blood vessels. And you can incorporate foods like spinach, almonds, avocado, and dark chocolate. You can have dark chocolate, especially for this reason, and that's going to help with your blood vessels. And I just think your blood vessels are all over your body. They're feeding your body nutrients and oxygen. We need them to be healthy. So magnesium-rich foods are absolutely key for that. Omega-3 fatty acids are, of course, anti-inflammatory in nature, and they're extremely beneficial for our heart health and reducing inflammation. So omega-3s are generally found in oily fish like salmon and mackerel and sardines, and that's where you're going to get that very active form of omega-3, which is EPA and DHA. But you can also find them in plant-based products like flaxseed and chia seed and walnuts. So these are foods that are really important to be including in your diet if you have high blood pressure. And also you do want to be thinking about reducing sodium intake because that can worsen hypertension in those who are genetically susceptible. So you can add herbs and spices to your food for flavouring instead of salt, especially if you have high blood pressure. You also want to be supporting vasodilation because, as I said, it's when the arteries become stiff and they become constricted that you can end up with high blood pressure. So there are certain foods that are nitric oxide boosters, and it's nitric oxide that helps with vasodilation. They're foods like beetroot, watermelon, and leafy greens, and they can really promote blood vessel relaxation and improve your circulation. And a lot of my clients who have cardiovascular issues, I'm recommending that they have a beetroot juice every day, or they're bringing in pomegranate. That can help with their blood vessels as well. And I just love pomegranate for many different reasons because it helps to protect your DNA as well, and it's an antioxidant. So there are many reasons to bring in pomegranate seeds into your diet, but also I find like a beetroot juice with some ginger added to it is a great addition to your routine to help with high blood pressure. There are also some key amino acids, which are L-arginine and L-citrulline, and these are found in nuts and seeds and again watermelon, and they're going to help to support nitric oxide synthesis and vasodilation. And of course, exercise is so important to increase nitric oxide production. It's going to enhance blood flow and it will lower blood pressure over time. Now, how are we going to address low blood pressure? Well, as I said, hydration is absolutely key. When you are dehydrated, you are far more likely to have low blood pressure. And that's why you need to aim to drink plenty of water. Just monitor your water throughout the day. You want to be drinking at least a litre in the morning and the afternoon. I find just filling a large bottle with water just helps me to get a better idea of how much water I'm drinking, because if you're just having glasses, it's very hard to keep track of that. But if you fill up a bottle of water in the morning and in the afternoon, you know exactly how much water you've been drinking. And you can also add electrolytes to that water and drink beverages like coconut water or cucumber water or something that has lots of electrolytes, as well as going to keep you hydrated. Another thing that they found with low blood pressure is these small, frequent meals can be extremely helpful in keeping your blood pressure up, because large meals can actually divert the blood flow to the digestive system, and that can cause this postprandial hypotension. And as I said at work, I almost fainted after lunch, and that could have been blood sugar imbalance, and I'm sure that was a factor at the time, but it could also be related to this. And with time, I've really noticed when I felt like my blood pressure is low, and when I've tested it, because we do have a machine at home, it has been very low, and it's when I've been doing too much or been away and just generally overdoing it, I find that my blood pressure will come down, and I know I need to look after myself as a result of that. Supporting adrenal health is absolutely key with those stress management techniques. So there is a lot to take in here, but it just shows how interconnected these systems are. And for years, we've spoken about blood pressure in the capacity of cardiovascular disease. But the truth is, it's really important to monitor blood pressure when you have an autoimmune condition as well, because it's going to tell you how active your autoimmune condition is. And also, when you have an autoimmune condition, it's about managing it and making sure that you don't go into another autoimmune flare. And by managing your blood pressure, you're going to really help with some of those symptoms of dizziness. I mean, there's so many clients that come to me who are feeling dizzy and fatigued, and they are symptoms of low blood pressure. I mean, they can be symptoms of other factors as well, but it is just worth checking your blood pressure. And of course, if you have high blood pressure, you're in that inflamed state, you have a condition like rheumatoid arthritis, you really need to be thinking about bringing your inflammation down and checking in with those markers like high sensitivity C-reactive protein, the LPA, and the small dense LDL, because that is going to give you a good understanding of whether your high blood pressure is causing you a risk with cardiovascular events, and that needs to be monitored and managed as best as you possibly can, and reducing inflammation is key to that. So if you have any questions about this, feel free to pop over to my Instagram account, which is at the Autoimmunity Nutritionist. Next week in the Autoimmune Forum, I am going to be running a challenge and giving away lots of products because it is Thanksgiving next week, and I thought, what better week to be sharing some of my favorite products with you, and I'm just going to create a challenge around that. So I'm going to be going through some key areas that you can focus on when it comes to your autoimmune health, maybe prepare you to get ready for 2025. But I'd love to see you over there. That's in the Autoimmune Forum. And that's on Facebook. You'll find the link to that in the show notes. And if you would like to find out more about my services, some of the testing that I've mentioned, then you will find the link to that in the show notes as well. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll be in touch soon. Take care. Thank you very much for joining me today on the Autoimmune Reset. I really hope you enjoyed the discussion, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode. And if you liked it, I would hugely appreciate a review on iTunes, as it helps me understand what you like about the podcast and to help share the information with more people. I'm excited to speak to you next time, and remember, you have the power to take the reins on your health. So keep the faith and celebrate the small wins. Until next time.